And
hello, everybody. Mark Schaftlein with you, and this is the Schaftlein Report. It's Thursday's edition, and folks, we are broadcasting bi-coastal from Delray Beach, Florida, and from the great state of California. Drew, welcome back to the show. Happy to have you as my guest today.
Oh, it's great to be reunited as always.
Well, we've got some exciting news. Let's first talk about the exciting news. The author, Drew Allen Thomas. Tell us what you've sort of been creating over the past 9 months, Drew.
Well, lucky for the audience to have the book right here in my hands. So anyway, America's Last Stand. Will you vote to save or destroy America in 2024? So that's the title of the book here. And I'm really excited. It's doing well. I'm finally getting out there and talking about the book and doing the PR circuit. As typically the PR guy behind the scenes, I'm going back on these shows. And look, I think it's an important book. It's a book not only to give people conviction about what they already know to be true about the importance of the 2024 election and the importance of defeating the Democrats, but also to persuade many people who are still uncomfortable with Donald Trump or think or are coming up with all kinds of reasons, whether they're from propaganda they've been told for the past 6 years, 7 years from the Democrat Party and media about Trump, or, I don't like his it makes the case to everyone why it's so important that Trump is elected in 2024 and what the stakes are. So this is an important election. You say that every election, but 2024 is truly, we're living through history. What's at stake here is as important as, I would say, the Civil War, 1861 and 1776 with the Founding Fathers. That's the truth of it. So I really implore people, I put things in perspective for them. And I make the case. And I mean, honestly, if you read this book, even if you're a Democrat, there's no way you can ever vote for a Democrat again. Impossible. If you have any brain on your in your head.
Drew, put the book title up again. This is Drew Thomas Allen, folks, America's Last Stand. And you know what? It's really appropriate, Drew. We're going to talk about some of this stuff right now. I want to get into what happened on debunking a lot of the media narrative that you've heard about the election from Tuesday night. All you've heard for the past day and a half is abortion, abortion, abortion. That's it. That's why Republicans got crushed. These idiots don't know what they're talking about. There is some degree of truth in what they are saying, but let me get to it. And Drew, again, you and I haven't rehearsed it, but this is my theory of the case on why the media has gone completely overblown on this. I want to start with the state of Kentucky, a state I know a whole lot about because I was born in Louisville. Listen, Kentucky's governor won by 5 points. Okay, a little historical background. He went into this election with a 55% approval rating. And he was an incumbent governor. I beg to ask anyone in our audience, do your history analysis. Most of the time, if not every single time, you have a politician who is an incumbent sitting with a 55% approval rating going into an election. They do not lose. And as evidence behind that, every other Republican down ballot, Secretary of State, all the cabinet positions, everything went to Republicans and not by skinny margins either. So when you hear this BS in the media that, a red state's been flipped blue and, it's a negative Trump effect, that is the biggest bunch of baloney. And when you hear Daniel Cameron, he wasn't a good candidate. He's an exceptionally good candidate. But I don't care how good of a candidate you are. He's young. He's got a bright future. And look, a lot of famous people, Drew, like Ronald Reagan, they not only lost their first election, they lost a couple of them. So I'm not going to count Daniel Cameron out by any stretch. But the governor of Kentucky, his father was governor for 2 terms. And unlucky as people were in the state, there were a lot of natural disasters. And forget the fact, we cut through the BS on this show, whether a guy's a Democrat or Republican. This guy performed an exemplary role when the people of the state needed him, and they rewarded him with a second term. So, again, I don't want to, Drew, it irritates me to no end when everybody blames everybody and says, oh, no, this is what happened. Let me talk a little bit about Virginia, and then I want your reaction to this. Virginia, they completely redrew every district. So you heard on the media, well, it's a blue state again. No, it's not. Virginia's a purple state that was trending bluer until Glenn Youngkin came in. He was down 2 Senate seats. He still is down 2 Senate seats. The negative is when they redrew those districts, they did lose the House. So again, we're not going to, put perfume on a pig here. It was not a good night. But to sit here and say it's all abortion, that's not necessarily true. Drew, your comments on my intro here.
Yeah, well, firstly, I think that people took what happened in Ohio, which didn't have any gubernatorial race. It was just about, voting for marijuana legalization and also for a constitutional right to abortion, right? So they took that, which is the only thing on the ballot, and they applied that to Kentucky and Virginia and these other races as well. And sure, is abortion some kind of factor? But in a much more limited way than we're being told. This was deja vu, the reporting, just like it was about the midterm elections, blown out of proportion, like you're saying. Kentucky, look, one thing I want to say too, you cannot compare gubernatorial races or statewide races to a national presidential campaign, unfortunately. Honestly, if our side, conservatives, treated these state elections like we did presidential elections and citizens voted accordingly, we might have won some of these races, including the governorship in Kentucky. But that's not an overwhelming loss that, the incumbent Andy Beshear retained the governorship and beat Daniel Cameron. But here's something for you. I just got a couple numbers. 2020, 1.3 million people in Kentucky voted for Trump. Okay? And Andy Beshear, the incumbent Democrat governor, won with 694,000 votes. So where were these 600,000 so-called people that showed up in the presidential election in 2020 that voted overwhelmingly for Trump over Biden? They didn't show up. They didn't vote. So this is bizarre. And then when you get into Virginia, I think the problem is that the Republicans and the media, they give people false hope. They're not realistic. So before these things, they say, but here, let me put it this way. To many in your audience, myself, yourself included, I think that as sane Americans who understand what the Democrats are doing to the country, I think that we sit here puzzled and cannot understand how any American can still vote for a Democrat. But unfortunately, a lot of those people aren't listening to this show. And frankly, we as citizens aren't going out and converting them and having conversations about politics. The biggest problem we have that we need to fix between now and 2024, in my opinion, is start talking about politics with people in the country around you at church and so on and so forth. I meet so many people, they don't want to talk about politics because it's depressing. Well, you know what? It's time to get over it and start treating politics and the Constitution like the quote unquote, national religion again, like Abraham Lincoln urged us to. And you better be talking about it everywhere to everyone, because we've got a year to convince people to go out and vote for Trump in overwhelming numbers.
I want to add one other piece to it. If we allow the Democrats to frame this as a single issue election, and they're going to be out doing it. You're going to hear the word abortion out of Biden, out of Harris. I mean, it's going to be plastered on every advertisement because they have nothing else to run on. Drew, when we look at the overall state, and we're going to get into this, we've still got bad inflation. Food prices are high. Yeah, gas came down, but it's still high. We got a complete open border. We have a foreign policy debacle on our hands. There's not literally in issues that are important to most people, one thing going right in this country, which is why Joe Biden is sitting at a 36 to 40 pick your poll approval rating and a 55 to 59% negative rating, and why by three quarters right track, wrong track. 3/4 of Americans think the country's going in the wrong track. So again, your key point about state elections versus federal, that's a big deal, folks, because these Biden numbers, I do not see him getting any better. And the age issue, which we haven't even brought up yet, he's not going to get younger before the election. So let's dive into a couple other things here, because I'm not going to keep rehashing what happened on Tuesday. We're either going to learn our lesson from it, or we're going to go down in flames in 2024. And I think we will. But Drew, even post-debate, Trump's at the minimum, he's up 25 points in Iowa. Most states, he's up 30 to 50 points. I know you believe it's a foregone conclusion that Trump's going to be the nominee. Give me your thoughts on that, because last night I thought two people did reasonably well, Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis. I don't think the others were factors. Vivek Ramaswamy had an impressive performance for part of the debate. But Drew, this is about fighting for second place, in my opinion. And I don't know that the Republican Party's helping itself by doing what we're doing here.
No, look, as I watch these GOP debates, to me, it's like watching Colin Kaepernick film himself at some private tryout for an NFL quarterback position that he's never going to get because there's not any slots open and nobody's looking at him. That's what I feel like watching these GOP debates. Everyone knows, and we've known for 6 months based on the polling, that Trump's the guy that we want. Trump's the guy that's going to win the nomination likely. Now, if it was a different situation, you saw DeSantis like rising in the polls and cutting into that lead and people showing that they wanted to abandon Trump and go with DeSantis or someone else, I'd have a different feeling and conversation about it. But the DeSantis campaign is acting more and more like the Lincoln Project. I mean, there is little differentiation between what they're saying and the attacks against Trump, the revisionist history, and so on and so forth. Like, look, I'm a realist. I work in politics behind the scenes. I know how ugly it is. So I'm not really sensitive to that, but I'm a pragmatist and I want to win. And Trump still, I mean, it's like 2020, you have DeSantis out there campaigning for Trump, talking about how great his record was, even during the COVID stuff. And now you have him coming out and just bashing him left and right about all kinds of stuff. And, it's just when these people say they're putting America first by running, they're not. They're not. They're trying to force themselves in there, and they're hurting our cause. We could be spending all this time and certainly this money already working on electing Trump in 2024, rather than beating each other, beating him down, and sowing this chaos in the country with independents and other people who we need to be working to bring into the fold that are unhappy. So it makes no sense to me. It's absurd. It's like watching some, playtime, some theater up there on the stage, because everyone knows that the guy that's not there is actually the guy that's winning every debate, because this is just happening and we don't understand why. I mean, it's fine. But at some point it has to end, and it'll end when the money dries up for these people. But it's just, as somebody who loves the country and is a realist, this is not helping us. It's a waste of time. And this is not 1976 either, I would say. This is not, Ford versus Reagan, for the nomination. Ford, by the way, was never elected president. He was only there, a third in line, because, you had Nixon's vice president who basically resigned. And then you had Ford chosen to replace him and become the vice president. And then you had Richard Nixon resign. And that's how you got Ford. So
when we come back from the break, we're going to dive into where we go from here. See you in 60 seconds.
The world is about to shift. Banks are going cashless globally with the emergence of central bank digital currency, which will bring with it programmable money and the ability to turn on or off your purchasing power based on your digital social profile. It's like the equivalent of spyware in your bank account. You need to get out of the system with the world's safest and most private assets, silver and gold. Call Kirk Elliott, PhD, 720-605-3900. Banks are supposed to be the safest placeholders for cash in the world, but in 2022 that changed. The Federal Reserve pulled out $2.5 trillion of liquidity out of the banks, and the Fed also changed the requirements so banks don't need to keep any funds on hand. This means banks are starved for liquidity and have now become very dangerous places to hold your assets. Get out of the system with the world's safest and most private assets, silver and gold. Call Kirk Elliott, PhD at 720-605-3900.
Okay, we're back. Drew, here in the state of Florida, where I'm broadcasting from, Ron DeSantis has been a fantastic governor. He won last election in a blowout by over 20 points. But here in Florida, Trump's up literally by 30 points here in the state of Florida. Let's move forward under the assumption Trump is our nominee. He's beating Joe Biden in poll after poll by a range anywhere from 4 to 5 points. And in 8 swing states, he's up in 6 of those swing states. So in my view, Joe Biden's support is starting to erode. And I cannot think of anything more ridiculous than what I heard today the United States has been insisting to Israel that they open this corridor, if you will, for humanitarian aid. Now, again, I know some people may think that way. Why in the hell are we telling Israel how to manage a war when 1,400 of their citizens were slaughtered? I just don't get it. I know why they're doing it politically, but Drew, this is another example. The fact that we're trying to tell the Israelis how to run their war with this humanitarian pauses. How the Israelis are going to give 3 hours notice that, okay, at noon tomorrow, we're going to give you a 4-hour break. No more bombing during that period of time. That in itself is, it's as bad as it gets. And then when I see the response to our soldiers being attacked, over 40 attacks, and what do? We have a jet fire, a bomb in an ammunition depot that the Iranians are supporting. I mean, where's the proportionality here? This reminds me of Jimmy Carter-esque. And I got to tell you, Drew, Joe Biden is making Jimmy Carter look like a stallion.
You're exactly right. I mean, before this, he made, Jimmy Carter look like a stallion on the economy. Now he's doing it in foreign affairs. And look, if we're being honest, why would anyone trust the American government to actually have the best interests of the Israelis anyway, when you know that the Democrat Party since Obama has really been funding both sides of this war? That's the reality. Now, I'm not somebody who says, look, Israel, let Bibi be Bibi is what I would say about this situation. Right. This is Israel who had their citizens slaughtered by Hamas. And frankly, if they don't cut the head off of this snake, they know that Hamas is going to come back stronger than ever. So look, are they a sovereign nation? Yes. So why are we doing this and telling them to? I mean, the Biden administration, of course, as we've seen, a large portion of the Democrat Party are radical, pro-Hamas, pro-terrorist, anti-Israel, anti-Semites. That's the reality. And so they're trying to appease to these people. I mean, we have representatives of Hamas as proxies in our Congress in the form of Ilhan Omar, in the form of Rashida Tlaib, that are out there saying, they're out there talking about genocide of the Jews, to be honest. That's what they mean when they say all the way to the sea. So it's unbelievable to me. I mean, this is so sick to me that we would do this to Israel. I mean, we had our 9/11, obviously, weapons of mass destruction, all that's a different conversation. But my goodness, we know what this feels like to be attacked. And we want to sit here and pretend like, and of course, the left and the talking points, they want to act like it's these sides are the same. Like Hamas is the same as Israel. They're just two foreign adversaries, and they're not. And I'm sick of the ceasefire talk, too, because the ceasefire was, hey, we gave you Gaza in 2005, 2006, and then they used Gaza to what? Fire missiles into Israel. And then it was they had a ceasefire before the slaughter of Israelis. So, I mean, I'm sick of this. I mean, they have not given the hostages back. And frankly, look, I don't want a ton of bloodshed, but at the end of the day, why don't we exercise our muscle to demand that these terrorists, the Hamas leaders that are billionaires, that are hiding out in Qatar, they're not even hiding. They're being
No, they're not hiding at all.
They live there.
Right. And here's the contrast I want to make. If Donald Trump was president of the United States right now, and for that matter, damn, you could pick anyone off that stage last night, there is zero chance they would be pushing what the Biden administration and Secretary Blinken have been pushing on this humanitarian corridor. The logic behind it is so flawed. I mean, I get what the Israelis are doing. I really understand that. But this logic that the Biden administration is saying is, well, after the war is over, the Palestinians are going to be humiliated and this rage will go on forever. Yeah, it may. But at the end of the day, the sovereign of Israel, the sovereign state is what's at stake here. And all this crap, river to the sea, that's all PR. And when you mention the Democratic Party, it is shocking. The stuff on college campuses and how much the left, you and I have talked about this, has infiltrated these mushheads, and you're seeing it in full display here. I don't know if it's half the Democratic Party, but there's a decent chunk of it that's why the Biden, in my opinion, I think the reason they're pushing for this humanitarian window here is from pressure from the left of their own party. And Biden sees what's happening in Michigan, how he's losing in Michigan. And it's a swing state. And if his support is eroding, which it is, I mean, his support among black voters is down. His support among young voters, 18 to 24, is down. His support among Asian Americans is down. He knows he's bleeding, and he's got to do something to try to put a tourniquet on it. And this idea, well, he's still a year away from the election. No, you're exactly right in your intro, Drew. If he doesn't right this ship pretty soon, it will be Trump against some other Democrat. And I think there is still a real possibility that could happen. The cognitive decline is evident every time the man speaks. And I just think there's a real risk that could happen. On the good news, Drew, the Israelis have been destroying these tunnels. They've been finding all kind of weapons that they're destroying. The Israeli military appears to be exercising what we knew the Israeli military was capable of, and they do seem to be getting some good results.
Yeah, they do. And, I just want to say something, because war is a horrible thing. It's an ugly thing, but it's a necessary thing. I wish we didn't need militaries. I wish violent force was never necessary as well. But we would have never won World War II if we had social media back then like we do today. All we see are reports from MSNBC and everyone else who does not want Israel to win, who is anti-Israeli. They just put out every day, okay, well, you had more quote-unquote Palestinians killed and so on and so forth. And, of course, it's Hamas, which is using their own citizens, preventing them from leaving, putting them in harm's way intentionally so that they can drive this propaganda and use this propaganda to help them win. Because Hamas... they are a bunch of, they're terrorists, but they're Neanderthals, to use a line from the Biden administration, Neanderthalic thinking, right? I mean, these people don't have a chance in HE double hockey sticks of being victorious against the Israelis unless our own government and other governments interfere and prevent Israel from actually doing what's necessary to win a war. If Israel fights this like we fought, our previous X number of wars, they won't win. And they understand that this issue is not going to go away. And the Democrats and those who are sympathetic with Hamas and falsely believe, just like the race narrative in America, that the Palestinians, that's their land. I mean, there's no such thing as Palestine, by the way, never has been. But anyway, they don't want them to win. So it's unbelievable to me that this is happening. And I mean, how many Palestinians live happily and peacefully in Israel? How many Jews live peacefully and happily in Gaza? That tells you everything you need to know.
Well, and the interesting thing about it, I'm glad you touched on that, a lot of the Arabs that live in Israel, they support the Israeli government, what they're doing. They don't want any part of Hamas. And that, again, you very rarely hear that reported. Let me get back to, we got a few minutes left. Let me get back to some of the domestic issues here. When I saw this story about, I know Mayorkas was on Capitol Hill testifying. Mike Lee wants him impeached. He should be impeached. The guy is not doing his job, but he's following orders from the Biden administration to keep that border wide open. Hell, there are actually people now getting on buses in these Central American countries, driving up through Mexico. Folks, this is a disaster. It will end up getting worse. And what's it going to take? Some terrorist attack in this country to prove people came across that southern border for it to end? I hope not. The other thing and I want to touch base on here, and Drew, let's talk about this a little bit. We thought we had a debt problem last year when the budget deficit crawled over $1 trillion. The newly released figures from the Treasury Secretary Yellen, $1.7 trillion deficit for this past fiscal year. And when you throw in $300 billion that Biden's trying to forgive on student loan debt, you're talking a $2 trillion deficit. Folks, when they had the Treasury auction today, it was a disaster. It was great. Rick Santelli on CNBC graded it a D-. Interest rates spiked up. They settled down a little bit, but they had come back down. The 10-year was down to about 4.55. And the question was, will it break lower or higher? Well, we got our answer today. It broke higher. And as a viewing of this show, it's trading around 4.8%. If that thing ticks back above 5, you're going to see some carnage in the marketplaces because the United States is on an unsustainable path. We are now $33.5 trillion in debt. And per your book, this is another reason why we have to elect Donald Trump and Republicans to the presidency, the Senate, and the House. This insane spending has got to stop, and it will never stop under a Joe Biden or any other Democrat if they occupy the White House. You cannot have debt at the level this country has relative to its GDP. Our debt now exceeds our gross domestic production. So that's a bad thing, folks. And here's another thing that should scare you a little bit here. The interest on this debt, okay, is significantly higher because of these rising interest rates. I mean, you're taking $200 billion a year of interest payments, additional interest expense that the government has, because a year ago interest rates were about 1%. Now they're at 5%. Drew, your thoughts on this?
Well, sure. I mean, it's really frustrating because we know what the formula of success is. Reagan put it into practice. And it's not just the fact that the government isn't doing what's necessary to cut its own spending and exercise some fiscal responsibility. It's the other policies that the Democrat Party and Biden espouse as well that are going to prevent us from doing what's necessary to right the ship. Look, I mean, they need to just blow wide open our GDP growth. And the way to do that is the Reagan approach, which, of course, is removing red tape. It's actually tax cuts and so on and so forth. And look, I warn about this in the book. I have a chapter where I talk about, look, I'll tell you exactly what the world is going to look like if you don't deal with this and we don't get rid of the Democrats and Joe Biden right now. The world is moving very steadily away from the dollar. It's called de-dollarization. So you talk about paying off our debt. You talk about interest rates and so on and so forth. Well, it's going to become a lot more harder to do that if we have countries that are bailing on U.S. debt. So if we have de-dollarization take place, it's going to be instantaneous. I mean, it's going to become, we can't even pretend it. We won't be able to pretend anymore like we are currently where, we'll kick the can down the road. Well, that point's going to arrive pretty fast for us. And all this stuff is happening. And, of course, in state elections, let's talk about abortion, though, right?
Drew, we got 30 seconds left. Let's sum this up. Put the book out there one more time so our audience can take a look at it. Folks, this is a great read, America's Last Stand. I want you to, go out, buy the book. You'll see we really need to have Republicans in office. And Drew, again, I can't thank you enough for coming back on the show today. Welcome back. It's so good to see you. And your views, as usual, are spot on. Thank you for being my guest today. All right, that's it, folks. See you next Tuesday. Have a great weekend.